It was supposed to be a regular Tuesday. I stayed a bit late to finish up a client proposal. Everyone else had already left. As I walked toward the elevator, I saw her, Ms. Clara Bryant, my boss. Clara was the kind of leader who made people nervous. Sharp, elegant, and always composed. The kind of woman who could silence a room with one look. I wasn't scared of her, but I definitely didn't know her. We both stepped into the elevator. She barely glanced at me before pulling out her phone. The doors slid shut. Then the lights flickered. A loud clunk echoed. The elevator jolted, and stopped. We both froze. Did that just happen? I said, my voice sounding far too casual for what I felt. She pressed the emergency button. Nothing. No signal. Her phone, dead. Mine. 2% and barely working. She sighed and leaned back against the wall. Of all the days, she muttered. I tried to lighten the mood. Could be worse. At least we're not stuck with a stranger. She glanced at me. You might be surprised. Was that a joke? We were stuck. No signal. No one knew we were in there. And time. It passed slowly. At first, we sat in silence, lost in our thoughts. But then, something shifted. At first, the silence felt professional. You know, that awkward space where neither person wants to say the wrong thing, especially when one of them signs your paychecks. But being trapped in a metal box forces things to change. Clara removed her heels and sat cross-legged on the floor. That alone stunned me. She didn't look like someone who ever relaxed. Don't just stand there, she said, patting the floor beside her. Might as well get comfortable. I joined her, still trying to process the situation. I glanced at her. Without the usual heels and blazer, she looked human. So, she said after a long pause, do you always stay late at the office? I shrugged. Trying to prove I deserve the promotion I won't get. She raised an eyebrow. You think you won't get it? I know I won't. You barely remember my name. She smiled. It's Evan. I looked at her, surprised. She continued, and you've been with the company 2 years. You work hard, never miss a deadline, and you avoid office gossip like it's a disease. I stared. You noticed that? She chuckled. I notice everything. I just don't always say what I'm thinking. There was something about her tone. Not cold. Not distant. Just, tired. I decided to risk it. And what are you thinking right now? She looked right at me. That maybe. I haven't taken the time to see people for who they really are. It was the first time I saw Clara Bryant, not Ms. Bryant the boss. And for some reason, it felt like this elevator wasn't just stuck, it was opening something neither of us had expected. The silence that followed her words wasn't awkward anymore. It was heavy. Like something unspoken had just shifted the entire energy of the room, or in this case, the elevator. She stared at the ceiling. You know, when I was younger, I used to dream about working in a place where people liked their boss. I tilted my head. And now? Now I'm the boss, and I think most of them are just scared of me. I wasn't sure what to say. Was she opening up to me? Why now? I don't think people are scared of you, I offered carefully. They just don't know you. You keep everything so tightly guarded. Clara gave a short laugh. Can you blame me? I've seen what happens when you let people in. They use it. Twist it. She paused. My ex-fiancé worked in the same firm. I mentored him. Pulled strings. 2 weeks after he got promoted, he dumped me. Took credit for one of my biggest deals. Oof. Then, she added, he married the HR director. I winced. Okay, that's brutal. She looked at me with a half-smile. So yeah, now I work twice as hard and trust half as many people. Something about the way she said it made me feel like I wasn't just hearing a story, I was being let in. I'm sorry that happened to you, I said softly. She glanced at me. And what about you? Any horror stories? I gave a small laugh. Not like yours. Just, grew up watching my dad work 2 jobs, chasing respect he never got. I guess I'm trying not to end up the same way. Her expression changed, just slightly. Like she recognized something familiar in me. For a moment, we didn't feel like boss and employee. Just 2 people, stuck in a quiet space, with no one watching, and nothing to hide behind. Time moved differently in that elevator. No clocks. No distractions. Just us, and a strange sense that something real was finally happening. I stretched my legs, trying to keep the mood light. Well, if we're trapped much longer, I might have to start telling bad jokes. Clara smirked. Define bad. Why don't skeletons fight each other? She raised an eyebrow. Why? They don't have the guts. A pause. Then, to my shock, she laughed. Not a polite chuckle. A real, head-tilted back laugh. I can't believe I'm laughing at that, she said, covering her face. I'll take what I can get, I said, grinning. Then came silence again. But now, it was comfortable. Clara leaned her head against the elevator wall and let out a slow breath. You know what's strange? I've worked in this building for 6 years. I've ridden this elevator more times than I can count. And somehow, this is the first time I've felt calm. I looked over at her. Maybe that's because no one's expecting anything from you right now. No phone. No meetings. No pressure to be perfect. She turned to me. You make it sound like I'm living in a cage. I didn't answer. She stared at the floor for a moment, then looked up. Evan, has anyone ever told you that you see more than you let on? I shrugged. Comes from being underestimated most of my life. Same, she whispered. There was a pause. Her eyes met mine, and they didn't look away. It wasn't romantic. Not yet. Just real. 2 people, carrying different battles, suddenly realizing how similar their wounds really were. Then, softly, she said, if this elevator hadn't stopped, I might have gone another year without really talking to you. I nodded. And I would have just kept thinking you were made of steel. She smiled. No, she whispered. Just very well-armored glass. We sat in stillness again, but this time, it felt sacred. Not awkward. Not tense. Just quiet honesty. Then, suddenly, the lights flickered. The elevator jolted. Clara and I both sat up straight as the panel lit back up with a beep. Looks like we're moving, I said, trying not to sound disappointed. She stood slowly, brushing off her skirt. Back straight. Shoulders rising. The boss returning. But something had changed, and we both knew it. The elevator began its slow crawl upward. I watched the numbers tick by. 4. 5. Then Clara turned to me. Evan. I looked up. After today. I don't want to pretend this never happened. And I don't mean just being polite around the office. I felt my heart beat faster. What do you mean? She took a deep breath. I mean, when we walk out of here, I want to remember this version of you. And I want you to remember this version of me. The one without the armor. Ding. The doors slid open. Clara slipped on her heels, adjusted her blouse, and turned to me one last time before stepping out. I'll see you tomorrow, Evan. And maybe next time, we don't need a broken elevator to talk. She walked out of the elevator, and for the first time, I saw her not as Ms. Bryant, the untouchable boss, but as Clara, a woman who had finally let someone see behind the glass. And me? I didn't just walk out of that elevator. I walked into something entirely unexpected. The next morning at the office felt different. Not because the lights were brighter or the coffee was stronger, but because she was different. And so was I. Clara walked in around 9:15, as usual. She nodded at a few people, said good morning to the front desk, but then paused when she saw me. I stood at the copier, pretending to read something important. She walked over. No blazer this time. Just a simple blouse and slacks. Still professional. But, softer. "Morning," she said. "Morning," I replied, glancing up. For a second, it felt like everyone in the office disappeared. She lowered her voice. "I meant what I said last night." "So did I said quietly. "I don't want to go back to pretending either." She looked around the room, then back at me. "Lunch. Conference room B, 12:30. Just us." She didn't wait for a yes. At exactly 12:30, I walked in. She was already there, 2 takeout boxes on the table, and a notebook in front of her. I raised an eyebrow. She slid it toward me. "Your promotion pitch." My chest tightened. "You actually want to hear it?" "I want to hear everything," she said. "And not just because of last night. You've earned more than I've given you credit for." We sat. We ate. We talked. And for the first time, Clara Bryant and I weren't just boss and employee. We were people. And in just 2 hours locked inside a broken elevator, she had done something I never expected. She saw me. And even more surprising, she let me see her. They say 2 hours can't change a person. But everyone in the office could tell, something had changed. Clara wasn't suddenly soft, or unprofessional. She was still sharp, still in control. But now, she made eye contact. She listened longer. She asked people how they were, and waited for the answer. And me? I stopped hiding in the background. 2 weeks after our elevator incident, I presented a new campaign strategy to the board, with Clara at the table beside me, not in front of me. When the room applauded, she leaned in and whispered, "Told you they'd love it." It wasn't just about the promotion. Or the presentation. It was about being seen. Sometimes, family doesn't come from blood. Sometimes, it forms when 2 people lower their walls, long enough to understand each other. Clara didn't become my best friend. She became something stranger. A mentor I respected, and someone who, in a weird and quiet way, rescued me, just by letting herself be human. All because of one elevator. One unexpected pause. One choice to talk when it would have been easier to stay silent. That moment didn't just change the day. It changed everything. A month passed. Things at the office ran smoother than ever. The tension that used to follow Clara like a shadow was gone. People started dropping by her office, not just for approvals, but to talk. And me? I was no longer the invisible employee staying late for recognition that never came. I had a name. I had a voice. But the moment that truly sealed how far things had come didn't happen in a meeting, or the elevator. It happened one evening, after hours, when I was packing up to leave. My phone rang. Clara. I hesitated before answering. We usually only spoke during work hours. "Hey," I said. She sounded different, nervous, maybe. "I hope I'm not crossing the line." "You're not," I said quickly. She let out a breath. "I just wanted to say, thank you." "For what?" "For seeing me," she said. "For not using it against me. For being decent when you had every right to pretend nothing happened." There was a long pause. Then she added, "Sometimes people think strength is about being untouchable. But I'm starting to think, real strength is knowing when to drop the act." I didn't know what to say. But I didn't need to. Because then she said something that caught me completely off guard. I'm hosting a small dinner at my place next Friday. Just a few people from the team I actually trust. I'd like you to come. Silence on my end. Then, I'll be there. And that was it. Not a fairy tale ending. No slow-motion hugs. Just two people, learning how to rewrite the rules of connection, one conversation at a time. Because sometimes the most unexpected relationships start in the most unexpected places. Friday came faster than I expected. Clara's dinner invitation sat in my mind all week. It wasn't just about a meal. It felt symbolic. Like we were stepping into unfamiliar but meaningful ground, outside the office, outside the roles we were used to. Her apartment was exactly what I imagined, sleek, minimal, high-rise view. But it had small surprises. A messy bookshelf. A cracked coffee mug on the counter. A cat named Harper who hissed at everyone except her. There were only 4 of us, me, Clara, Nina from legal, and a guy from operations who had clearly known her for years. But despite the casual setting, Clara looked different. Not because of what she wore, but how she carried herself. Less guarded. More open. Midway through the meal, she raised her glass. I used to think leadership meant distance, she said. That respect only came with silence. But lately, her eyes flicked to me, just for a second, I've realized connection doesn't weaken authority. It strengthens it. Everyone raised their glasses, murmuring polite toasts. But I knew what that moment really was. A message. And I felt it deeply. After dessert, Clara walked me to the door. I wasn't sure if inviting you was the right move, she admitted. But I'm glad I did. I smiled. You didn't have to invite me at all. I did, she said. Because this, she motioned between us, whatever this is, it matters. And not just in a corporate mentorship way. There was a beat of silence. Then she said the words that echoed for a long time after, 2 hours in an elevator taught me more than 2 years of board meetings. A few months later, I stepped into that same elevator again. Alone this time. Floor 3 to floor 17. No hiccups. No jolts. No unexpected pauses. But as I stood there, watching the numbers climb, I realized something. That elevator didn't just trap us, it freed us. From assumptions. From roles. From fear. Since that night, things had shifted, subtly but permanently. Clara and I never became overly familiar. There were no whispered conversations behind closed doors or anything scandalous. Just a quiet, mutual respect that grew into something rare in the corporate world, trust. She started asking for my opinion in meetings. I started challenging ideas I once would have silently accepted. She pushed me harder, but believed in me louder. And when my promotion finally came, she didn't just send an email. She called me into her office, handed me the letter herself, and said, "You earned this. And not just because of your work ethic, but because you taught me something I didn't know I needed to learn." I asked her what that was. She smiled and said, that people don't follow titles. They follow truth. I'll never forget that. We went back to our roles. Boss and employee. Different levels on the org chart. But behind every decision, every conversation, was the memory of that night, when time stood still long enough for 2 people to finally see each other. Sometimes, life gives you interruptions for a reason. And if you're lucky, you'll walk out of the elevator better than you walked in. A week after my promotion, something strange happened. I found a handwritten envelope on my desk. No label. No signature. Just my name, Evan, in neat, graceful script. Inside was a short letter. "Evan, I've been in leadership for years, and I thought I had seen every kind of employee, every kind of ambition. But I hadn't seen someone like you. You didn't climb the ladder by shouting. You earned your place by listening, by observing, and by showing compassion in moments most people would ignore. You reminded me that people don't need perfect leaders, they need real ones. Thank you for giving me the space to be human. And thank you, for letting me see you for who you are. See. I read it twice. Then 3 more times. It wasn't a declaration. It wasn't romantic. But it was deeply personal. The kind of note you keep folded in your drawer forever, because it tells a story only 2 people truly understand. And for me, that letter meant more than the raise. More than the title. Because it came from the one person I never expected to open up. And it proved that what happened in those 2 elevator hours wasn't just a fluke. It was a turning point. For both of us. A year later, I stood in front of that same elevator, coffee in hand, briefcase in the other, watching the doors open automatically, like they always should. It never broke down again. Not once. Funny, really. How something so mechanical could spark something so deeply human. Clara had since been promoted to regional director. She traveled more, spoke on leadership panels, and started mentoring young professionals outside our firm. But whenever she was in the office, she still found time to walk past my desk and say one simple word, talk. And we would. Not always about work. Sometimes about life. About doubt. About how hard it is to lead when you're expected to have all the answers. There was never a label for what we were. But whatever it was, it mattered. And I learned something I'd carry with me into every room, every meeting, every future position. The most important things don't always happen at the top floor. Sometimes, they happen when the elevator stops. That day, as I stepped inside, I caught my reflection in the polished chrome. I didn't just see a promoted employee. I saw a man who was no longer invisible. Who was no longer waiting to be noticed. I pressed the button for floor 17. And this time, as the elevator rose, so did something in me. Not ambition. Not pride. Just peace. Because one accidental pause had started everything.